So today we're going to talk about the 1999 film directed by Sofia Coppola called The Virgin Suicides. And yeah, it's a movie I've been wanting to see for quite some time. I've seen a couple of Sofia Coppola movies. Of course, Lost in Translation, which is absolutely incredible. I love Lost in Translation, and I think most people that I've talked to that have seen it agree that it's absolutely just a masterpiece. And what year was Lost in Translation? 2003. Okay, so Virgin Suicides was 1999. Then we got Lost in Translation in 2003. And I also really do like the two other ones that I've seen. So, like, there hasn't been a miss from her. I really liked Somewhere. It's just such a quiet movie compared to, like, I guess most of her movies are, like, pretty quiet, focused on these characters and, like, their introspection and everything. But, yeah, I just really resonated with Somewhere. I liked it a lot. Just the vibe of it was super fun. And then yeah, the dynamic with the two was great. And then also in theaters, actually, I saw On the Rocks, which was 2020, so just a couple years ago. I think when the first COVID lockdowns happened and then theaters reopened, I think I went and saw Tenet and this, and then like everything like closed down again. But yeah, I really did like On the Rocks. Again, charming. Bill Murray just being like a savant, a ladies' man, and Rashida Jones just trying to live her life. But it's just, again, feel good movie. This one's more feel good than some of her other movies. Some of the other ones can be a little more depressy. And yeah, Virgin Suicides definitely is a little more on a down note compared to some of her other movies. So yeah, directed in 1999. It was made on a $9 million budget. Sorry, that's what it said on IMDb. I got two sources here. One from IMDb said 9 million, and then 6 million it said on Wikipedia. And I'm not 100% sure which one is true. I think I saw a few sources that said 9 million, so I'm gearing towards that one being the true one, but not 100% sure. And yeah, it is her first feature, but of course she is the son of Francis Ford Coppola, so she was able to get this amount of cash for her first feature. But hey, I mean, it turned out so well, and she definitely is like a great director in her own right without connection to her father. Honestly, to me, a little more influential to my taste personally. But so yeah, made on a $9 million budget, and when it was released, it wasn't too like crazy box office numbers. I think it got like 5 mil on the domestic on the release, and on Box Office Mojo it said right now a $10 million worldwide box office. So in general, it definitely made money because it definitely did get more of a cult following after its release. It definitely got a lot more traction and just, yeah, acclaim as a great film. And so a few things about this movie. It was screened at Cannes. I don't think it won anything, but it was at Cannes. And again, some of that could be accredited to her father, but also, yeah, hey, incredible movie. I think I'll stop saying that from now on because, yeah, in its own right, it's just such a great movie. And then, yeah, so the way the movie came to be, the production came to be, was that somebody held the rights to the book that it was adapted from. And Sofia Coppola had read the book and really, really loved the book. She said, I forget exactly my source, but she said that in reading the book, she never really expected that she would really want to be like a director writer. But then she read it and she was like, okay, this is something that I have to do. And then, yeah, she went off and made this. The rest is history. So that's great. And so, yeah, somebody had the rights to the book. And then there was another script that was already written, but she pitched her script and they liked hers better. And they went with hers. So, yeah, that's pretty badass. The film set in Detroit, Michigan, but it was filmed in Toronto, which is awesome. I looked I forget where it listed. I think on IMDb, it listed the exact house. And then I looked on Google Street View on the exact house where it was. And yeah, it definitely looks still very similar. Same walkway, same house. Nothing's really too different about it. So yeah, that's really cool as a Canada native. So cool to see that. And so yeah, they filmed it in Toronto, and that is that. So I'm just going to get right into the movie, right into just the plot and some of my thoughts. I don't think this one's going to be terribly long. I feel like I have more to say on like sci-fi genres that I just have a lot to say about. But this is kind of movie where it's like I really, really did appreciate it and the experience and the craft behind it. But it's not something I'm going to analyze too deeply. I'm just going to give my kind of baseline thoughts of it and just a quick rundown of the plot. So I think from now on, yeah, there will be spoilers. So if you don't want to get anything spoiled for this film, then hey, click off here. No hard feelings. Go watch it, actually, because, it's a pretty great movie. I really liked it. So, yeah, at the beginning of the movie, we have this family of 5 daughters living with their 2 parents. And what are the names of the daughters again? I have them written up here. So we have Lux, Mary, Cecilia, Therese, and Bonnie. And the film has this, like, playful aesthetic at the beginning, but it also feels a little, like, melancholy and a little, like, off-putting. Because the way the film is shot is very, as you can even see in this, like, still right here and the poster, it's very, like, glossy, little, like, angelic is the word I might use. Whenever there's shots that are in between trees and, like, the sun is seeping through, the edges are very, like, feathered and everything's just so glossy and, like, picturesque. And I don't know the exact words to describe it, but there's definitely a certain look to it where the tone of everybody in the film, as in the acting, really contrasted with the way it was shot. So it had this weird, like, melancholy feel to it. So I think some of the feeling can be captured with this still right here, where you have this glossy imagery, these bright summer images that are feel very angelic, but it's these people who clearly, once you get to know them in the film, that behind their faces there's definitely some, like, darkness to that. And so that contrast was immediately apparent, and I think that's just huge props to Sofia Coppola for directing it that way and getting those performances, knowing exactly what mood she wanted to set right at the beginning. And then right at the beginning we have those writing, I don't know what to say. It's just, the text pops up in kind of like writing, kind of stylized font, showing all of the girls and introducing all of them. So yeah, Lux, Mary, Cecilia, Therese, and Bonnie. And in this still here, Cecilia is not in the still because the majority of the movie, she is not in. So at the beginning, we have Cecilia in a hospital after trying to slit her wrist and kill herself. She's in a hospital, and then the doctor says to her, "You're too young to know how bad life gets." And she says, "Clearly, doctor, you've never been in the body of a 13-year-old girl." And that is a wonderful quote. Great quote. Iconic quote. And at first it kind of is played off for laughs, but then it does get a bit darker in meaning once you know the entire scope of the entire movie and kind of just the messages around what the whole movie is about, being about just, you never know what people are dealing with inside all of this gossip that's been going around about these sisters. You can't just take it for face value and have that be your judgment of the entire situation, because behind closed doors things could be completely different. They might have completely different reasons for everything. Let me just clear my throat there. So yeah, we had Cecilia, who was in the hospital, and then she comes back to the house with her 4 sisters, and of course it's just such a serious thing in the family, and the parents are there's a lot of religious imagery for the parents, and so they're very strict about it, and they kind of lock the kids down. Maybe not locked, they definitely do that later, but they're just lead a very protective life over them. And them being teenage girls, they really want to socialize, they really want to do things and not just be locked in their house the entire time. And so they decide, the father convinces the mother that they would like to host a party in their basement, and they invite some of the neighborhood guys around to have to socialize, to have a party in their basement. And the entire story, I should have mentioned this at the beginning actually, the entire story is narrated from the perspective of these guys, these neighborhood guys who are the similar age to them, go to school with them, that have now grown up and are looking back on this situation, trying to kind of piece together what happened to these girls and how everything went, because it's still such a mystery to them. And so as these guys come over, they're recounting exactly what happened. So they go over and everybody's in the basement. It is a bit awkward. Nobody's really talking too much. The girls not having socialized with too many people. I think at this point they are going to school, but they're just not very social with everybody. I could be wrong. Maybe they're keeping them home at that point, but still not too social. And so, you can definitely tell that with the party. Cecilia, just sitting in a corner, not really wanting to socialize. She tells her mom that she wants to go. And so her mom's like, okay, yeah, you can go for a bit. Concerned about her, of course. Doesn't want her to be there and not enjoy herself. And then, unfortunately, the mom, she goes upstairs and she sees that Cecilia had jumped out of a window and impaled herself on their fence and killed herself. And yeah, all that while a party was happening. And so everybody is going outside as the dad is like holding on to her dead body on the fence. And the guys, it's kind of weird the way they reacted. It wasn't like, they weren't like screaming. Nobody was like, the mom was like the biggest reactor out of all of them, but they were very like, they saw it, they were stunned, and then they just left. Like they knew, okay, yep, we're going to leave. We're out of here. Which is, I mean, like, understandable. There's a dead body there, but like, yeah, their reactions just seemed a little muted to maybe what they should have been. But alas. So yeah, so Cecilia had killed herself, and now the parents become even more protective compared to before. They pretty much, yeah, they have their kids home all the time. When school starts, yes, they do go to school, but yeah, ever since Cecilia kills herself, they're very protective. The priests come to visit them, and the dad is kind of out of it. He's sitting there, he's watching baseball, and the priest's like, oh yeah, can we talk about Cecilia? Can I talk with your wife about Cecilia? And he's just there, oh look, a double play. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, look, baseball, right? He can only talk about baseball. It's like he tries to talk to him, and the dad seems normal at the beginning of the scene, but then as the scene goes on, you can tell that he's really just, whenever something's going to be brought up, he's going to just like push it down and just not say anything. And yeah. After that, the priest goes upstairs and he goes to try to talk to the mom, and she barely talks. She's just in her room all the time, and yeah, she just barely talks. And yeah, clearly it's just, yeah, the parents are having a rough time. So after a bit of that stuff, the girls, they go to school, and this is where Josh Hartnett's character, Trip Fontaine, is introduced. And there's these like this 80s music coming in. I don't want to say 80s music. I forget. I don't know exactly the era, but this like, yeah, 80s, 90s music comes in, introducing him, slow-mo of him whipping his jacket over his shoulder, you know, walking down the hallway. Literally everybody turning their heads, looking at him. And his whole thing is he's a womanizer, in that he can get any girl, and Lux, played by Kirsten Dunst, one of the sisters, is the one girl who doesn't like fall for his charm. And of course that intrigues him. The classic, oh, the one that isn't in love with me is the one that I have to go after. And so as he notices this from Lux, from Kirsten Dunst, he notices that, he then goes to their house and watches TV. It's such a weird, like, difference from nowadays, because, yeah, he was interested in her, and then he decided the best course of action was to go hang out with her family, her entire family, and watch TV with them for a bit, which is such a stark contrast to nowadays, because I guess it makes sense within the narrative of the film, because you have this overprotective family. They're probably not just going to let her hang out with this random guy by themselves, but yeah, it just shows that people aren't hanging out online or anything. They have to go knock on the parents' door, go hang out with them. It's just funny. And so yeah, seeing that he's just sitting on the couch with them, looking over at Lux in between the two, you have the dad just sitting there. And so, yeah, he goes watches TV, and then when he leaves, he's in his car, and Lux just runs out of the house, makes out with him for like 10 seconds in the car, and then runs back in. And he's just like smitten. And then after that, we have this whole thing of Trip trying to convince the dad, hey, can I take Lux, and then we'll get some other guys to take your other daughters to homecoming so that they're all together, so it's not just her going, so they're more safe because they're all together. We'll drive all of them, things like that. And he eventually convinces him, and it's just him going through the hallway, because the dad's a teacher at the school, and being like, hey, I know it's not my class yet, but hey, can I take your daughter to the homecoming? And yeah. So eventually, the father convinces the mother to allow this to happen. And the homecoming happens. You have all the guys. They all come over. All four of them. They were all four chosen for very specific reasons, according to the narrators. They say one of them had a car, one of them had good weed, and one of them had a high GPA, so he would impress the parents. And one of them, which is my boy, Hayden Christensen, plays a character called Jake Hill Conley. And he's in there just for a bit. Just as one of the prom dates. Pretty sick. I noticed him and I was like, oh man, how old must he be in that? I don't know. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he must have been like around 20, which is funny. So yeah, good old Hayden Christensen in there. Love to see it. And so they go to homecoming, and you have this whole dynamic where, yeah, the girls are very shy. You can tell, of course, from the previous instances and just throughout the movie that they haven't socialized very much. And then you have this whole thing where Lux, she's very like promiscuous in this movie. It's her like sexual awakening pretty much throughout the runtime of the film, and she's very hands-on with Trip and everything, and all of her sisters are kind of like observing this. And then there's the one time where she goes under a table with Trip, and then one of her sisters comes too, and like she starts making out with Trip, and then the sister's there, and she feels like she has to make out and like drink the booze that they have as well. And it's just one of the ways that Sofia Coppola kind of like subtly hints to like more going on behind the scenes rather than what the narrators are telling us. Because yeah, this is kind of just, again, this whole story narrated by these guys who knew them back in high school. And that one instance of, again, yeah, her being under the table with Trip, and then her sister being there with one of the other guys and like feeling like she has to like make out with him and drink the booze, whatever booze that I think it was peach schnapps, actually. Yeah, I do remember. I remember they said it specifically, and I was like, yeah, that's funny. It's just, yeah, a way to show that the sisters are not always getting along. In the movie, I feel like most of the on-screen time, it's showing the sisters, they're never having quarrels with each other. You have Lux have things where it's like the mom tells her that she has to burn all of her vinyls and everything, but the sisters don't really have many quarrels. And I think a lot of what we can see on screen, we can kind of relate to the unreliable narrator, as in they don't know specifically what's going on, so the events might be a little skewed because of their interpretation of the situation. And so yeah, as the homecoming goes on, the three other sisters besides Lux, they all drive home with the guys because they didn't know where Lux and Trip went. And they went to a football field, and they had sex in the middle of a football field and then fell asleep. And this big plot point that they both fell asleep, and in the morning, Trip walked away and left her there. And then it cuts to an interview of old Trip Fontaine, and he says that he didn't feel like he walked away, and he didn't feel like it was the wrong thing to. He just felt like that's what he had to do. He didn't care that he left her alone. But then he also goes on to say that he misses her, or it's like she was the one that he could never figure out. Which just makes it feel like, of course, in the movie, he's just like the womanizer, and it feels like that's just one like part of his bucket list. Or just the question mark that he never had answered as to why she wasn't into him at the beginning. And it just felt like the relationship wasn't as important to him as inside with that comment. And then you have also just later, like in his interview later on, somebody comes and it's like, oh, we have this thing to go to, and you can tell that he's in like a rehab center or something like that, which makes a lot of sense with his character. So it just, yeah, that one comment of having that interview in the future really was a good idea from a writing standpoint. Just, yeah, having the connection to him being in a rehab center and things like that. Yeah, it was really well done, and it gave more depth to his character. So after that, when she had to like catch a taxi home in the morning, she got home bright and early in the morning, and the parents go crazy, of course, super protective, didn't know where she was. And then they pretty much lock the girls down there for good. Take them out of school. The parents have just gone crazy at this point. The dad is like talking to things. he's in the hallway of the school just talking to plants. And we're like, oh, yes, hey, plants, you guys are photosynthesizing. Wow, that's so sick. Which was hilarious, actually. And then you have the principal, I assume, coming over and it's like, oh, your daughters haven't been here for 2 weeks. And he's like, oh, is that right? Is that right? And it's kind of just like head in the clouds. And it's just, yeah, a subtle creepiness to the aura of the entire movie. And so after they've been locked in their house for such a long time, the boys across the street, the guys who are narrating the movie, they are trying to communicate with them. So they see that there's like some Morse code lights going on. And they're like, okay, try to decode that. And then eventually they're like, oh man, what do we do next? And then there's a line in the narration where it's like, oh, it's the simplest thing that we should have thought. And they called them. But the interesting thing is like they called them and then they used music to communicate. They called them, they put on a record, and then they put the phone up to the speaker and just had that playing. And it's like, it is a cool plot point. And it just feels weird that they don't actually just talk to them. They're not making any effort to actually speak to them. They're just playing this music. It makes it feel like them trying to communicate with them. It's not for the reason of helping them or for any of their benefit. They're just so infatuated and curious with their lives. It just feels like they're the subjects of a science experiment. And it kind of makes sense with the entire scope of the movie. Everybody has their opinion on what happened, on what is going through these girls' minds. At the beginning, there's so many interviews of people being like, what, like having their opinions, the gossip that's around town, shaping the image of these girls. And it's like they're at the middle of a science experiment. And it makes sense again with these guys. They're not trying to actually communicate with them. They say in some dialogue, which is interesting, things like, oh yeah, they were smarter than all of us. They had us all figured out, but we didn't know anything about them. We could never understand them. They were locked behind closed doors, but they were still like the smartest people around. And it's just, their image of them was out of curiosity. And again, yeah, just like young adolescent intrigue with these girls that they just don't understand. And yeah, I think that line at the beginning that Cecilia said, where it's like, clearly you've never lived as a 13-year-old girl. These adolescent girls are just teen girls. They've just, even nowadays, you can tell that they go under, like, they can go under scrutiny, under a microscope by people around them, making sure that they're doing the right things or things like that. And yeah, this portrayal of that by Sofia Coppola, who definitely lived through it, was like, yeah, it's just incredible. And it's, yeah, really well done. And so, yeah, as they call them, they eventually meet up. The girls leave notes on their cars, and they tell them, okay, come here at this time. I think it was midnight one of the nights, and we're going to, like, go for a drive. And so they get all prepared. They bring over the car. They go to the back door. They meet Lux, who's smoking a cigarette. And she's like, okay, yeah, go to the basement, and then we'll just get ready, or something like that. I think she said, oh, yeah, you guys can come on in. Maybe they just walked in the basement. But, like, yeah, so they go inside, and they're like, oh, yeah, we'll be ready to go in, like, 5 minutes. And then they walk in the basement, and they're just, like, goofing off, being like, wow, this is going to be so crazy. And then, like, right before that, there's, like, this dream scene where you have them driving. They're all stuffed in this car. It's a nice summer day. They're just driving down. You have these, like, what is it? These picture over picture, like, translucent images, very, like, dreamy again. And then it cuts back to them being in the basement. They haven't left yet. And then one of them turns around and sees one of their bodies hanging from the ceiling. And then they look around. There's one of them on the kitchen floor. Then they find Lux in the garage, who had killed herself by closing the garage and having the car engine on and suffocating herself. And they all killed themselves. And again, this is kind of, you could probably easily guess what was going to happen, and I kind of definitely assumed as well. But it gives a lot of context to what the voiceovers are talking about the entire time. their entire investigation. They always say, oh, even years later when we all hang out, we still look back and think, what happened? What could we have done? How did it come to this? What were they like? They go through their diary at one point. I think it was Cecilia's diary. They stole their diary after she killed herself, which is just super messed up, which is like, yeah, a lot of the things the guys do are messed up, but of course the movie's not going to portray it as such because it's from their perspective. And they read the diary. They like skip over all the writing about trees. We could just get to things like, who likes who, blah, blah, blah. I forget the exact diary entry, but they're clearly not omitting details. They're just oblivious to character details that would actually give depth and actually maybe give them a chance of analyzing their actual personalities rather than their just surface level interpretation. And it almost seems like they don't want to actually solve the mystery because the intrigue is something like entertaining to them, if that makes sense. So, and yeah, that's how the movie ends. And they all do this thing where like they're standing outside the house after they moved out. They're like holding this lighter, just standing there. It's like, okay, cool, sure. But yeah, it's a great movie. It's like, at the same time as being such like a sad concept, of course, sad storyline and everything, but it still is at the same time sort of a fun high school movie with interesting characters. Of course, Trip Fontaine is like, he's pretty funny still, even though his character is a bit messed up when you actually analyze everything that he does in the movie. And there's just a lot of fun music in it. And of course, it starts off with like the fun font with like the handwritten font of all their names, the Virgin Suicide's title, everything like that. So yeah, it has that weird feel to it. And like I said at the beginning, I think the tone of the movie is just what Sofia Coppola did masterfully, where it's like you have these super glossy, angelic images compared to these actresses who are portraying characters who clearly have something deeper going on inside. And it just has that weird, unsettling suburban nightmare atmosphere that I really, really dig. Another like suburban movie that I love is Blue Velvet, which like is more hands-on, very like in your face, masochistic, everything like that. But this is another entry in like the suburban, unsettling, and the way it's done with Sofia Coppola kind of portraying it as more of a dreamlike. And then when you have the added context of these guys are looking back on them more of as a science experiment, something they're interested in. With all the context that I just discussed, it just comes together so nicely in this film. Yeah. It's, yeah. Great movie. I'm trying to think of anything else I have to say. Oh yeah, there was one thing I want to mention where it is adapted from a book, and I could definitely see this being a book that like schools would analyze. Like I could definitely see this being like an grade like 11 English book that you would read and analyze in your class, because like, yeah, there's so many different characters that have so many different motivations, and just some of the imagery is very strong. Like, of course, I did want to talk about actually the tree in their front yard. And then so at the very beginning of the film, you have the tree in the front yard and it said notice for removal. And that's kind of just like a foreshadowing to everything that's happening in the movie. I guess you could have the connections of like a family tree. So that's what a tree represents often. And then when they put on that notice for removal, that's just foreshadowing that that tree is going to be cut off. People are going to die in this family. And I mean, yeah, pretty much all of their offspring, all of their kids do end up dying at the end of the movie. So their family tree cannot continue. And then you have Cecilia, who makes her handprint in that one filling in the tree. And then in that scene where all of the 4 other sisters are trying to stop the guys from cutting down the tree, they're really just guarding Cecilia and their last, like, some memory of her. In the context of the movie, it could be like that tree kind of reminds them of Cecilia for any reason. Maybe it's the handprint. Maybe it's just when she was alive. They just remember it being there and they just don't want it to leave. But yeah, them guarding the tree is just such a... They're standing together in that moment and trying to protect the family tree. But then again, it's the community that is coming down and is destroying the tree. So again, it's another way of telling the audience subtly and subtextually that this family unit, this tree, they're trying to keep themselves together, but the community is kind of just shaping their image and what's best for them. In the movie, we don't know like too much about these girls. We just get this interpretation from these guys. There's clearly a lot more going on behind doors, but they don't get a say because these people are removing this tree and there's nothing they can do about it. So it's really just showing how the community is shaping their lives and pretty much determining the outcome of the entire movie. So I just thought it was a great image and metaphor to use for the movie. And yeah, just works so well. But I think that's all I'm really going to say today. That's all I'm going to say on the Virgin Suicides. I really did like it a lot. I gave it a 4.5, or sorry, just 4 out of 5 stars. Again, I always say it's just a review. I always just review a movie something, but talking about it is a lot more fun. And yeah, I really did appreciate this movie upon thinking about it deeper and would highly recommend. Yeah, Virgin Suicides. I really do like all that Sofia Coppola has done. So looking forward to seeing more. Maybe I'll watch, what does she have? Marie Antoinette. I've heard The Bling Ring. I've heard mixed things about The Bling Ring, but I'd still be interested in watching it. Nevertheless, that is all for the Virgin Suicides today. So now it is time to choose the next movie. I'm going to do Cloud Atlas. It is a long one, which is one thing that has made me not want to do it in the past, but I still really do want to watch it. I know it's not the most well-received, but it's a more contemporary sci-fi that I haven't seen that definitely has some acclaim to it, and I actually just don't know anything about it. I know Tom Hanks is in it. I know Halle Berry's in it. I know that one Bae Doona, who is in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Oh yeah, she's in The Host as well. So yeah, I'm going to watch Cloud Atlas.